The story begins with Sakurai, a lonely, miserable college student who spent his entire first year gaming. His scary face kept people away, but
He didn't care. What a Sigma.
everything changed when a certain hyperactive baddie with the biggest melons wants to get clapped by this loser very badly. It all started on the first day of his second year when he was approached by a short girl with huge poops. He immediately recognized her. It was Uzaki, his junior from high school. She looked thrilled to see him, but he just wanted to disappear because he is afraid of her jiggly milk. They walked onto campus. She asked if he'd be joining the swimming club. He casually mentioned that the college didn't have one and claimed he had big plans to expand his horizons. Uzaki, however, saw through the lie because every time she spotted him, he was just loafing around campus like a lost stray cat. A whole year passed, and Uzaki noticed he was still the same useless loner. So, being the self-appointed savior of his social life, she rushed up to him and asked him to hang out. He had no excuse since his class got canceled, so he stomped off, unknowingly scaring the life out of some passing girls. That's when the ambassador of chaos, Uzaki, came charging at him, only to crash straight into his stomach. He scolded her for hitting him with her bags instead of her, well, airbags. Damn! Naturally, she teased him for being a friendless hermit and insisted on keeping him company. He told her to buzz off, but she kept following him like a lost puppy. When he asked why she was tailing him, she cheerfully replied that she was free and would accompany him. For free! He grumbled that he preferred to suffer alone, which only made her smirk and ask if he was just shy around women. When he kept ignoring her, she finally snapped and shouted that he only ever used her when he wanted something, before he could shut her up. The entire campus had already turned against him, students whispering "scumbag" in multiple languages. Uzaki grinned mischievously. He had no choice but to let her tag along. At the cinema, she immediately noticed he was planning to watch a movie alone. She roasted him for his only company being his backpack, which he had actually named Beyond. He tried to shut her up, but she wouldn't stop ranting. Finally, he admitted he regretted bringing her. She, however, had already planned to stalk him, just in case he was going to buy some sketchy DVDs. In retaliation, he pinched her nose as punishment. When it was time to pick a movie, he figured he might as well let her choose, only for her to pick one he'd already seen. On their way home, Uzaki wanted to stop by an electronics store to buy new earbuds. Inside, Sakurai struggled to resist buying something useless, when suddenly Uzaki called him over to sit on a massage chair. As they enjoyed the massage, she confessed she came here often to ease her shoulder pain, because, well, carrying her enormous racks was a full-time job. Suddenly, she started moaning in relief. Sakurai, now extremely uncomfortable, tried to look anywhere but at her jiggly situation. She kept making questionable noises until he finally snapped and tried to drag her out. But she slipped away and hopped onto another massager where her chest started bouncing even more, right above her shirt's English inscription, "So big." The sight hypnotized him. His brain shut down. He had to forcefully close his eyes before the unholy jiggle physics ruined him forever. Next, she dragged him to a VR set where she immediately started screaming while battling online zombies. Sakurai found it amusing until she suddenly decked him with a controller. Annoyed, he decided to try it himself, only for the evil store employee to put on a terrifying shark attack simulation. Within seconds, he was freaking out like a toddler in a haunted house. In a panic, he grabbed onto something squishy, thinking it was a jellyfish. It wasn't. When he finally took off the headset, he awkwardly muttered that the VR was very realistic. Uzaki, of course, cackled. Still determined to prove himself, he led them to a batting cage, only to miss every single ball. Uzaki laughed so hard she said his dad would disown him twice if he saw this disaster.
Stop it. Get some help.
Accepting his athletic failure, he handed her his card and let her try. She confidently declared she'd hit a home run, positioned herself like a pro, and immediately pulled a muscle. She collapsed on the ground, groaning in pain, and somehow blamed him for her suffering. Sakurai, who had done literally nothing, had no choice but to treat her to dinner out of guilt. At the restaurant, she ate like a starving goblin. When he pointed out that her clumsy form made her look like an improper fraction, she surprisingly took it well, saying her rice cakes would eventually balance out. That's when she realized she had eaten his portion of food too. Furious, he was about to complain, but the cook interrupted, saying, "Forgive your girlfriend." Uzaki, seeing an opportunity, happily accepted the free handouts. Sakurai, however, barely got a single bite before she devoured everything. The next day, she showed up again to pester him, ranting about how different hanging out with him was compared to her female friends. Then, out of nowhere, she dramatically yelled that her back hurt from everything they did yesterday. Cue the entire class staring in horror. Even a nearby ugly cat looked disgusted. One day at the cafe where Sakurai worked, his boss asked him to serve a last-minute customer. As the boss was praising him for being polite and composed, a loud, chaotic screech filled the air. It was Uzaki. She had found out where he worked! Before he could evict her, she had already spread her hyperactive energy everywhere. The cafe owner, sensing incoming doom, went into hiding. Uzaki, however, immediately found him and introduced herself. The old man stared at her for a second before assuming she was a middle schooler. Uzaki was offended. Sakurai, however, just grinned and said she was basically a child, just slightly taller than Kevin Hart. For the first time, the cafe owner doubted himself. He had never misjudged someone's age before, but when he stood up and noticed her war stoppers, his words, not mine, his opinion changed instantly. Meanwhile, Sakurai tried to serve her food, but she refused, demanding he treat her like a VIP customer. And when he refused, she asked Sebastian to give Sakurai a pay cut for his insolence. She continued to ramble on like an overcharged hair clipper, so Sakurai had to explain that he was acting weird because he wasn't used to serving people he knew. She then asked if he usually treated the people from campus so poorly, but he told her she was special, and that's why he treated her like trash. She almost fell for his sweet talk, but immediately snapped when she realized he had just insulted her. When he eventually treated her like an honored guest, she made sure to mock his efforts, and he ended up tossing her out. Seeing how close they were, Sebastian forced Sakurai to go home early, just so he could endure more of Uzaki's pestering. The following day on his way to school, he suddenly froze in place when he came across a cat. Uzaki, stumbling upon him, noticed the cat refused to let Sakurai pet it, probably because his hands reeked of not orange juice. But when Uzaki stretched her hands out, the cat gave her a sniff first, then allowed her to pet it. She casually mentioned they had 2 cats at home, and Sakurai fantasized about petting them. But his virgin mind started running rampant. Suddenly, a bike passed by, startling the cat. Uzaki, determined to chase it, ran after it, but ended up getting stuck in a bush. Sakurai hurried over, only to be greeted by the glorious sight of her rice cakes. The idiot actually said, "Put that away!" as he smacked it closed. Since she was still stuck, she demanded help. As he pulled her out, the creep got her even more tangled. And that's when some passing ladies saw them in a very questionable position. They immediately freaked out. That afternoon in the cafeteria, Uzaki showed up as usual, although Sakurai found it difficult to look at her directly. After the morning incident, thankfully she broke the ice, since she had already assumed he was too embarrassed to ask her to join him for lunch. She suddenly spilled her tea when he casually mentioned he was meeting a friend. She wondered loudly why he was always alone if he actually had friends. Even though they ended up seated at different spots, Uzaki started making weird hand signs Sakurai didn't understand until she texted him. They continued texting, but it was mostly just Uzaki throwing jabs at his lonely ass. By the time she finally stopped, her noodles were completely soggy. Later that day, Sakurai was working peacefully at the Serene Cafe, only for Uzaki to show up and ruin his evening. She immediately grabbed onto him, saying she was excited to see him. His virgin mind immediately thought the worst, but she only wanted help with her essay. He blatantly refused, so she started begging. This made Sebastian give him some time off, just so he could be useful for once. As they started working, Sebastian even served them tea, because he wanted to watch them bicker. While Sakurai helped her, she suddenly asked to see his house, and continued to bug him, even asking why he didn't want her over. He explained that he already had enough trouble keeping pests out, and didn't need one more. When she offered to cook for them to save costs and even sleep over, he completely freaked out. His brain melted as he realized he absolutely would not be able to control his testosterone drive. This got him all flustered. The following day, Amy, Sebastian's daughter, was drooling as she admired Sakurai's hard-working attitude and his collarbone. She had always been a proud creep, so as she watched him, she noticed his ripped body was attracting more female customers. When he casually mentioned that he used to swim, she almost eye-stripped him, wishing she had X-ray vision. But before she could lose her soul, her father stopped her wild fantasies and told her to get back to work. Then, Uzaki showed up. Amy immediately wondered who the heck she was and why she was fancying her dad. When she asked Sakurai, he casually mentioned she was a second-year college student. Amy was shocked. She then watched as Uzaki and Sakurai geeked out about a game. So she asked her dad if they were dating, but he ignored her concerns and told her to serve Uzaki instead. Amy brought Uzaki a cup of water and formally introduced herself. Uzaki did the same, using her kitty eyes. Amy found her cute, but as she checked her out, she saw her oversized knockers wedged on the table. Amy almost lost control. Uzaki then went on a rant about her mission to save Sakurai's lonely life. But this only made Amy retreat to her father. Since they both shared the same idea, watching these two oddballs bicker, Sakurai was about to refill Uzaki's cup when she bumped into him, causing her entire front to get soaked. She sat on top of him, dramatically complaining about the cold water. The following day, Uzaki came to the cafe only to learn that Sakurai was out sick. This made her wonder why a hot guy like him was so weak. Back at Sakurai's house, while he struggled not to die, the doorbell rang. When he opened the door, a cheerful Uzaki was waiting outside. He wanted to lash out at her, but ended up collapsing instead. So she had to drag him to bed, but since he didn't have the strength to do anything with her, she decided to cook for him instead. Unfortunately, his house was full of junk, so she went on a full-on shopping spree and eventually made a killer meal. She wanted to feed him, but he refused and took the spoon himself. When she asked if it tasted good, he said his taste buds were like a dirty rug, which disappointed her. After eating and warming up, the dense girl held a bowl and told him to strip because he smelled like a grandma's damp sock. She actually forced him to be naked and started rubbing his body down, completely ignoring her chest doing the Lord's work. Outside, the creepy cat wished it was him. Next, she gave him some medicine, but when he noticed it was getting late, he told her to beat it. She refused to leave his side, so he thanked her for helping his sorry ass before passing out. 2 hours later, she woke him up, just to help her clear a game level. He told her to go home with the console. The following week, Sakurai hosted everyone for a barbecue, and Uzaki, well, she was busy being Uzaki. Sebastian and Amy simply watched everything unfold like they were there for the drama. Once Uzaki went to the bathroom, the duo asked Sakurai how the previous night with Uzaki went. However, he insisted the relationship was purely platonic. He then launched into a gloomy speech about how he enjoyed being a loner and wanted to avoid causing trouble for Uzaki if people found out she had been camping at his place. But all they took from his speech was that they needed to cook the clueless lovebirds until they were perfect. The following day at school, Uzaki suddenly appeared with a coin, eager to test her so-called hypnotizing skills on Sakurai. It wasn't working, but as he recalled how she had taken care of him, he decided to play along. Once he started acting sleepy, she was grateful that Sakurai was so stupid, because that meant he fell for it easily. She then asked him to call her by her first name. Although he thought it would be easy, he soon realized it was embarrassing and kept coming up with ridiculous alternatives. When he finally said it, she got so excited that she made him repeat it over and over, until onlookers swore never to fall in love. Thinking her hypnosis had actually worked, she started listing things for him to buy, including the latest VR set. That was when he smacked her forehead to reveal he had been faking it the whole time, just like her girl every night. She then scolded him for being so casual with Amy despite knowing her longer. This guilt tripped him into apologizing, but he begged her to drop the first name nonsense, which she reluctantly agreed to. He started waving the coin around, convinced that hypnosis was outdated nonsense, until Uzaki suddenly froze and turned into a vegetable, causing him to freak out. A few days before the Golden Week public holiday, Sakurai was told to take some time off since the cafe would be closed. He ended up playing video games non-stop for 2 days. Just when he was about to defeat the final boss, the doorbell rang, and he instantly knew Uzaki had come to ruin his solo NEET fellowship. She walked in and suggested they play D-Raymon Go, which had a new event coming up. He admitted that he had the game but never played it since, well, he was a loner. Naturally, she mocked him for this. Once outside, she caught the creepy stray cat in the game and proudly showed it to Sakurai. He glared at her so hard it looked like he was ready to stab her with his eyes, so she wisely took a step back. Then she checked what he had caught. It was all gorillas. When he complained about his eyesight making it hard to focus on the screen, she suggested they go get him some glasses. At the shop, they ran into Amy, and Uzaki immediately assigned her the role of Sakurai's personal shopping assistant. Amy agreed, but before she could recommend anything, Uzaki shoved a random frame onto Sakurai's face. Shockingly, it actually looked good on him. From there, things spiraled out of control. They made him try every single pair of glasses in the store, turning him into their very own glass shop clown. He got fed up with Uzaki's nonsense, but before he could escape, Amy made him wear her personal favorite. Then, just to make things worse, she told him to make a fist and open his mouth wide, fully embarrassing him in public. In the end, he and Uzaki bickered so much that they left without buying anything. On the train home, Uzaki showed him the dandy cat she had caught, but, as expected, Sakurai had only managed to get another gorilla. Next, she caught a lousy cat, and he still somehow got a bulked-up, happy gorilla. As they passed each stop, the train got more crowded. Uzaki remembered that there was a soccer game that afternoon, right as a real-life gorilla of a man bumped into Sakurai. He instinctively shielded Uzaki from getting crushed, but in doing so, he accidentally grabbed her airbags. Both of them froze. He immediately panicked, hoping his shield hero wouldn't rise. Desperate for a distraction, he looked around only to lock eyes with a smoking hot model, making his heartbeat skyrocket. At that point, he had no choice but to meditate and think about blue skies. Even when Uzaki tried to talk to him, he couldn't hear a thing. He was too deep in his mental training. Unfortunately, his brain started picking up on her hormonal signals, and the temptation became too much. He snapped. By the time they reached their station, Uzaki turned around, only to see that Sakurai had passed out while standing. He missed the stop completely. That evening, he woke up in a strange location. The next day, he narrated everything to Sebastian, who barely held back his laughter as he wondered how Sakurai managed to shut down his own consciousness just from embarrassment. Sebastian then told him to be more free-spirited like Amy, who was always comfortable hanging out with boys. But she instantly disappointed him by revealing that no guy had ever approached her. Later that day, Sakurai noticed Uzaki lying down looking depressed. She complained that there were no holidays that month and that she was bored out of her mind. So, in a rare moment of generosity, Sakurai suggested they hang out the following weekend. Uzaki was shocked. The notorious loner was actually suggesting an outing? When he asked her to pick the location, she immediately chose a train trip. The moment she said it, his brain flashed back to the airbag incident, making him flustered. Seeing how excited she was, he felt the need to ruin the mood by revealing that Amy had been the one who suggested the outing. Uzaki immediately got mad, but the clueless Sakurai had no idea what he did wrong. On the day of the outing, it rained. He assumed Uzaki would cancel, only to open his door and find her standing there, soaked like a wet puppy. She said she had gone shopping and wanted to freshen up, then casually asked him to join her in the bath. He refused. After bathing, she borrowed one of his t-shirts and started preparing to cook a meal. Seeing no escape, he decided to help. Once they finished cooking, she suggested they play some games. He agreed, saying it wouldn't hurt to be a useless student sometimes. But she reminded him that he had always been useless. They ended up playing for hours. On the way home, Sakurai realized he had actually enjoyed himself so much that he told her she could come over again. Uzaki took that and ran with it. When she got to the station, she asked if she could come back the next day so they could clear a dungeon. He agreed. However, the scatterbrain forgot her train pass at his place, so they had to walk all the way back again. One summer day, Uzaki ran up to Sakurai, full of energy. He, however, was not in the mood for her hyper antics. She didn't care and immediately asked for permission to come over, claiming she didn't want him finishing their game tower without her. Sakurai promised not to touch the creepy thing she loved so much. Later that day, Sakurai had a dream where he was trying to save a cat from the edge of a skyscraper. Instead of cooperating, the cat jumped over him, sending him plummeting down. He woke up sweating, mildly panicked, relieved that no one had seen him, until he noticed Uzaki staring at him, waiting for the perfect moment to laugh. She immediately leaned in and asked if he dreamt of falling from a high place. He told her to shut her pie hole since the lecturer had already started speaking. Incidentally, the lecture topic was about falling from heights, complete with an illustration featuring some weird cats, just like his dream. Uzaki, of course, took this as her cue to intensify her teasing. Even after class, she didn't let up. Sakurai tried to brush it off, calling her belief in psychology-based dream analysis superstition, but she insisted on believing in it. While jumping around as usual, she tripped on the stairs. Sakurai caught her just before she became an urban legend. While holding her, he casually mentioned that people who trip like that could develop a fear of climbing stairs, known as stair yips. The intensity in his voice left Uzaki horrified. Sakurai soon encountered a random guy who used him as an excuse to escape some girls. Since everyone tended to avoid Sakurai like the plague, the plan worked flawlessly. The guy, Sasaki, thanked him for the assist and explained that the girls wanted to drink all night. Since he didn't want them discovering that he was a total lightweight who got tipsy just looking at alcohol, he had been desperate to escape. The girls tried to follow Sasaki, but after one glance at Sakurai's resting serial killer face, they instantly gave up on the mission. As they caught up, Sasaki asked what Sakurai had been up to. This triggered a flood of memories of Uzaki ruining his life, but instead of ranting, he simply said, "Nothing much." Hearing this, Sasaki immediately freaked out and accused him of showing first-stage Jeffrey Dahmer symptoms. He demanded that Sakurai get a girlfriend. Sakurai ignored him. Sasaki grabbed his shirt, dead serious. Just then, Uzaki showed up at the worst possible moment. She froze in shock. Sakurai had another friend? He reminded her that they used to eat lunch together, but Uzaki insisted she always assumed he paid someone to sit with him, so he wouldn't look pathetic. Surprisingly, she looked genuinely happy that he had a friend. She even told Sasaki not to ditch Sakurai the Gloom Lord. Soon after, she and Sakurai got into their usual pointless bickering, leaving Sasaki to wonder what kind of relationship they even had. Once Uzaki left for class, Sasaki wasted no time and immediately jumped to the conclusion that Sakurai was in love with her. Then he asked how old she was, just in case he needed to call the cops. Later that day, while Sakurai and Uzaki were playing games, Sasaki showed up again. He bluntly asked, "How far have you two gone in the bedroom?" Uzaki, disgusted, asked if he was born dumb or if it was inherited from his dad. Sakurai answered no to all of Sasaki's inappropriate questions, but Uzaki made a weird noise that only made things more suspicious. Realizing this was spiraling out of control, she tried to clarify that Sakurai was the safest guy on Earth. Sasaki immediately pointed out that this was an insult. Uzaki, of course, did not realize this. Seeing that they weren't dating, Sasaki started saying a bunch of nonsense, hoping it would force them to realize their feelings. Instead, they left him alone, to matchmake the chairs. After they left, Ami showed up, furious. After introductions, she scolded Sasaki for taking his teasing too far. She warned him not to rush things, because it was her duty to make sure their love story became a 5-season anime, not a 60-minute movie. Sasaki, undeterred, stretched out his arm and asked if she wanted to team up. She slammed the table so hard it echoed across the cafe. Then, in her most serious voice, she told him to go get a haircut instead of ruining her perfect plan. Meanwhile, Uzaki bought a Choco Mint ice cream and offered some to Sakurai. He took one bite and without thinking asked, "Is this supposed to taste better than actual toothpaste?" Uzaki snapped. Apparently, he had just mocked the greatest flavor combination in existence. She told him to blame his worn-out taste buds for being too weak to appreciate the divine taste. Then, in an act of pure rage, she told him to start licking actual toothpaste instead of disrespecting Choco Mint lovers. Sakurai barely had time to react before Uzaki launched into a historic breakdown of Choco Mint's rise to glory. The passion in her voice was so intense that random people gathered to listen. By the time she finished, they clapped. Even after Sakurai apologized, she called him a lower life form. He had to explain that he had hated mint ever since he was a kid. Uzaki took this personally. She was so riled up that she actually tried to punch him. Sakurai caught her hand. Still determined to prove her point, she insisted that he take another bite. But all Sakurai could think about was how sharing the same ice cream stick technically meant they were kissing. Seeing her puppy eyes, he eventually let her feed him. Ami, watching from a distance, had her jaw on the floor. Uzaki then asked how it tasted. After a moment of internal struggle, Sakurai muttered, "It's nice." It was only when she took the final bite that she realized they had been sharing the same stick this whole time. Days passed, and finally the beach episode arrived. Sakurai, Uzaki, Ami, and Sasaki had all been set up by Sebastian. A few days prior, Uzaki had gotten a part-time job at the cafe, much to Sakurai's frustration. She said she wanted to be able to stare at his loser face all day while also making extra money for summer. Sebastian hired her on the spot because she was fun to have around. Sakurai was forced to train her, so he went through all the customs, with Ami acting as a practice customer. Uzaki then asked why he didn't add some jokes into his service. He responded that they weren't clowns. She said he was way too serious. He instantly fumed at everyone present. Ami then revealed they had already trained her beforehand. They just wanted to light the fuse on his short-tempered dot. Sakurai planned to become a temporary shut-in gamer for the summer, but Uzaki immediately shot him down, telling him to try something different for once. Even though he looked genuinely excited about his gaming plans, she ignored his enthusiasm and suggested they all go to the beach instead. This instantly caught Amy's attention, and when Sakaki suddenly showed up out of nowhere, they found themselves forced into the obligatory beach fan service episode. Back at the beach, Uzaki was unknowingly intimidating Ami at every turn with her war-stopping assets. Meanwhile, they realized Sakaki was nowhere to be found. They assumed he had gone to check out their summer lodgings since he had previously volunteered at the cafe. Meanwhile, at the beach, Sakurai was enjoying the ocean. Apparently, he used to love swimming. When he came back, Ami took one look at him and said, "Dude, with that swim cap and goggles, people might mistake you for a lifeguard." Uzaki, however, had a different take. "Ugh, you're giving off serious mommy's boy vibes," she scoffed before ditching him on the spot. Ami, left alone with him, proceeded to scold him even further. Then, she pointed out Uzaki chilling alone. She warned him that if he didn't stick by her side, random dudes might start pairing to her Bluetooth. To fix this, she told him to go over and make small talk. Like a true idiot, Sakurai started complimenting Ami's swimsuit instead. She immediately smacked him on the head. "Not me, you moron, Uzaki!" Finally getting the message, he went to approach Uzaki, only to get bodied in less than 3 seconds. Suddenly, Sasaki arrived with a watermelon and a bat. It was time to let out all their pent-up rage on the poor fruit. Sakurai was blindfolded first. Uzaki, seeing an opportunity, immediately started messing with him. Instead of giving him normal directions, she started throwing in video game controls. "Go left, now hit A, double tap B, wait, spot controls, dodge, dodge." Completely confused, Sakurai tripped. Somehow, in the chaos, he grabbed something soft. Ami and Sasaki watched in horror. Sakurai, completely unaware of what he had done, started feeling it more. Weird, is this a jellyfish? Ami quickly jumped in to save the situation. You're already grabbing the watermelon." Technically not a lie. Before Sakurai could take off his blindfold, Uzaki pulled off a substitution jutsu, swapping out what he was touching with the actual watermelon. He felt the real watermelon. "Huh, this one's kind of firm." Uzaki completely lost it. Later they arrived at the summer house, which turned out to be owned by Sasaki's parents. It was a pretty standard place. But Uzaki and Sakurai, being broke as hell, admired every single piece of furniture like they had just stepped into a royal palace. That night, they all went outside for a barbecue. After stuffing themselves, Uzaki suggested they play some games. Sasaki, however, had a different idea. "Let's do something exciting. Let's play in the mountains." Before anyone could protest, he dragged them all into the forest. But when Sakurai realized it was actually a test of courage, he immediately wanted to go home. "I don't do horror stuff," Sasaki smirked. "Announcing your weakness like that? Rookie mistake." At that moment, Uzaki's entire aura shifted. She suddenly exuded pure, unfiltered mischief. Sakurai felt a chill run down his spine. Before he could react, Uzaki snatched his phone. "Gimme that, I'm about to spill all your secrets." Sakurai's soul left his body. Panicked, he chased her into the dark woods. And thus, the true horror began. The story just started, guys. If you want the rest of the part, just subscribe. And come back again and